All right, so I'm just an idiotic, stupid dog. Me and the man, we were sitting around the big parlor room. Now, this is not a big parlor room, but it's just important that you know we're sitting in the lap of luxury. It's old, dusty, unkempt luxury. We don't have the money to keep it up, but we're living here, and the aura hasn't faded completely. I forget what you call it. Well, there's the corona. Maybe it's a corona. I don't know. But that glow has not, is still emanating slightly. We're basking in the glory of living in a rich, elitist neighborhood, a big, giant, glorious manor house. But we're sitting around like we're like, what's for dinner? I tomato soup. It's all we can afford is tomato soup tonight. I'm a dog. I'm like, I can't lick tomato soup out of a bowl. So what do? We go down the cellars. You can get all the bourbon, all the very best wine. Because, it's the yin and the yang. You don't have enough money for food tonight. You have a few chickens. You should make some egg salad and eat a few mustard greens. And, drink some bourbon. That'd be good for you. But tonight we're so stupid we're eating tomato soup or whatever. Tonight we're working for the producer. The producer, I'm not even going to discuss which producer it is, but it'll be his art. Whatever you see tonight, it's the art of the producer that came up with this horse shit take. This is another Skanks take, ode to the Skanks. I wish it was a big parlor room. It's a Skanks take. And it's all written out for me, bullet points. I got like 29 bullet points over here. I'm a stupid dog. It's good that I'm becoming a more fluent reader because all I'm doing right now is I'm reading what the producer produced for me. It's like I'm a marionette. Anyways, this is a thing. I don't know what it's called, but it begins with a bunch of old skanks from way back before. I don't know if they were skanks back then. I think it was the precursor. This is a prequel to the skanks. And it begins with a bunch of baldies. It's a baldy fest. It's almost all bald people. Jay Gomez, there's a baldy in a black T-shirt. There's a baldy in a backwards cap. There's one guy with hair. There's another guy. He might have some hair. You can't tell. It's a baldy fest. And it begins with somebody saying, boys. They're calling each other, boys. It's like, code word for white guys trying to pretend they're cool enough to say N-word to each other. My N-word. They're going, boys. But then the other thing, they're going, this podcast, old Baldy in the black T-shirt, which he's the ringleader from 10 years ago, but now he's not the ringleader anymore. He says, this podcast is blowing up. This podcast is huge. And everybody goes, huge, huge. And Baldy in a black T-shirt, he says, I wish we would have had done this 10 years ago. And one of the other Baldy says, we did do it 10 years ago, Baldy in a black T-shirt. And he says, whatever. And then somebody says to Baldy in a black T-shirt, but back 10 years ago, Baldy in a black T-shirt was a hot comic who started this podcast with a bunch of nobodies. And he throws that up in his face, in everybody's face later. But I'm a stupid dog, so believe me, I'm having trouble. But what the producer says is, one of the other Baldies says to Baldy in a black T-shirt, somehow Monday night's a sticking point. Evidently, they were doing this really successful podcast, and Baldy in a black T-shirt, he switched it because he had a baby to Monday night. And these other precursor skanks who were nobodies at the time, they started getting big because of this podcast. I mean, I don't understand. Anyway, this whole thing is what you would say is an exercise in passive-aggressive communication. Baldy in a black T-shirt is feigning obliviousness. He's feigning obliviousness. He said, we should have done this 10 years ago. And they're like, we did do it 10 years ago, and you threw us under the bus, asshole. Whatever, it's okay. But really, he's waning. And so 10 years yawn, he needs these guys because these guys who he gave their start to, Baldy in a black T-shirt, gave them their start. They've gotten to become bigger than him. Baldy in a black T-shirt is aged to the point where you're like, you need to go do some Mr. Clean commercials. Nobody knows what's going on with that bald head of yours, but the tables have turned, okay? And now, Baldy in a black T-shirt, he's trying to glob on to these skanks or near skanks. Mr. Gomez is there, so you know it's a skank thing. And anyways, Baldy in a black T-shirt, he was the main man back then, 10 years ago, but now he's trying to reharness. He's trying to glob on. He's trying to parasitically get some success out of the people that parasitically got some success off of him. And Gomez is right there. But Gomez, he chimes in, he says, Mike Cannon and other people that I wasn't comfortable with, like that fat blonde bitch. Now, Mr. Gomez, don't say fat blonde bitch like you're so angry. You don't even remember her name, and nothing ever became of her. You shouldn't single her out if she didn't go on and become famous. So that's kind of on you, Mr. Gomez. But Mr. Gomez, Mr. Gomez says, I'm sitting here 10 years ago, and I'm wondering, am I Mike Cannon? And I'm just going to say this, Mr. Gomez. I'm quoting Mr. Gomez. He said, and I have to move on, this is not cool. I'm not up with this. I'm Mr. Gomez. I knew I was Mr. Gomez before it became Mr. Gomez. Now I'm Mr. Gomez full bore. And what I'm saying to you is I had to move on, okay? So 10 years ago, you threw us under the bus. Now what's going on today? It doesn't matter. But I have to respect Mr. Gomez for that because Mr. Gomez, he very rarely speaks the truth. He's very rarely cognizant. He's very rarely not fucked up. But today, somehow, he's not fucked up. So what he said is truthful, so I have to respect it. Whatever. But the other guy says, I was trying to spread around the love. And another guy says, don't come in hot. And Baldy with a black T-shirt, the originator of the whole thing, he's saying, I'm sorry for coming in hot, but, as a dog, this is what I'm going to say. Everybody's right in this instance and everybody's wrong. But the hurtful thing is that Baldy in the black T-shirt, the hurtful thing that he said was, you had nothing. So Baldy got defensive. He said, and the other guy said, don't come in hot. Baldy said, I'm sorry for coming in hot. He's like, you had jack shit. You were nobody. You were nothing. I made you. You're made. You're made. I want to speak with your maid. Remember from the Flintstones? That's what Baldy's saying. You weren't shit. I made you. So whatever. It's okay. And Baldy's got a point about that. But what Baldy doesn't want to admit to is that now he needs them. Now Baldy ain't made. Now Baldy needs them. Gomez is bigger. It's a Baldy fest. There's a bunch of Baldys sitting around doing this podcast, whatever. Then all the burden you had, whatever. I can't read what the producer says. And you had a show. Baldy's saying you had a show because they're bitching at him saying you blew it up. You turned it around. You made it so we couldn't get together. But, the one thing that Baldy refuses to admit is that he needs them now. Baldy in a black T-shirt is not admitting he needs them now. They're rehashing the past, and both sides are right. Everybody's wrong, everybody's right, but whatever. The one thing as an idiotic, stupid dog I wanted to say is whether you're talking about, whatever kind of skanks you're talking about, precursor skanks, prequel skanks, skanks that didn't even know they were skanks yet, skanks don't have much self-awareness. Whether it's any kind of them skanks, they don't have no much self-awareness. They're like white brats. Gomez is one of the ones, he's the most whitey bratish of them all. So entitled. They have no self-awareness. Whatever, you got to say. Old skanks, reverse skanks, new skanks, current skanks, recently released skanks, recently sitting on the fence skanks, a.k.a. Shane, a.k.a. Fatty, whatever. These people, what they want to do is they want to graduate from the skanks to go sit on Joe Rogan's bleachers. Whatever. I don't even care.